No Credits Rolled.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 7 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen and today I'll give my thoughts on Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, the Fallout TV show, and Fallout New Vegas. But first I just want to do a quick announcement. We actually have a pretty cool thing with the show here. I'm happy to announce our very first partnership on No Credits Rolled, and that's with the wonderful folks over at Philly Drinkers. Of course, this is a podcast produced locally in the Philadelphia area, so we're happy to partner with Philly Drinkers. They have all the Philly sports apparel you could ever need at affordable prices. They've got some really cool stuff if you're a Philly sports fan. So use the link in the description wherever you're getting this podcast, and every purchase you make at Philly Drinkers helps out the show. So go check out Philly Drinkers. Thanks to them for partnering with the show. Now let's get on to the news. So this first story here comes from IGN. There's a lot of hubbub about Fallout in general now. And like I said, I will cover my thoughts on the Fallout show and Fallout New Vegas in the review portion of the show. But this first story regards Fallout 4, actually. With the massive success of the Fallout TV show on Amazon Prime, there's a next-gen update coming out for Fallout 4 that's hitting consoles and PC. I believe by the time this airs, it will already have come out. But you're talking 60 frames. That's the biggest thing I've seen. I think there's some other minor details, maybe some bug fixes. And while that sounds like a positive, and it is a positive, there was a long-anticipated fan-made expansion called Fallout London. And this fan-made expansion took a massive hit from this next-gen update. From Michael Kripe at IGN, Team Fallon's Dean Carter, project lead on the highly anticipated mod Fallout London, has opened up about how Bethesda's upcoming Fallout 4 update impacted the studio, saying the team felt, quote, blindsided by the move. He says the team had no communication from Bethesda when it came to the update's release plans, resulting in the unforeseen delay of Fallout London. While the team pivots to account for a relatively substantial new update for Fallout 4, Fallon is left wishing it had a heads up. So I did some looking into this update for this story, and there's a trailer that dropped way back in 2022 where they show off kind of the map and some of the NPCs they've added. And just from, it's like a 4.5 minute long trailer, it looks incredible. Like it's London, right? Like they really did it. There's a subway, there's the underground, there's the Thames, there's those kind of London-y, that's probably not the right word. You know what buildings in London look like. It made me think of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is my only touchstone for what London looks like, kind of. And so it looked very impressive, and it was obviously on a very large scale for this mod. And with that trailer coming out in 2022, they've been working on this update for years, and they kind of got screwed over by this next-gen update that came out of nowhere. I think overall, we kind of have a failure to communicate here. The messed up part is the mod, the Fallout London mod, was supposed to drop on the 23rd of April, and of course the next gen mod dropped on the 25th of April. So this team was kind of left, like they said, blindsided and kind of scrambling, trying to pick up the pieces. This is a pretty big scale operation for them, and they were having to move a lot of things around. So, I see both sides of the argument, Bethesda versus the Fallon team. And I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's F-O-L-O-N. So Fallon, I don't know. But for the Fallon team, the Fallout London mod is a massive investment for them. They have to time their teases for the mod, the PR for it, the trailers. I mean, it was essentially being framed as if it was an expansion for Fallout 4. But as far as I know, it would have came out for free. I should have looked into that more. But if it's a mod, it's going through the mod system anyway. But the presentation of it was very AAA. It was very high class. So these people are taking this very seriously. It's not, you're not getting Macho Man Randy Savage as your dragons in Skyrim. This is almost its own DLC in its own regard. Now, for Bethesda to drop this update out of nowhere, it completely derailed the team's plans. And I can't even begin to imagine how frustrating this would have been, because honestly, hearing the news about the next-gen update as just a fan of Fallout, the news kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know if they had this planned or if they were kind of waiting to see how the show did critically and word of mouth kind of thing. And because the show has piqued such interest in Fallout, if that was why they did this update. I mean, Fallout 4 came out years ago, and they're just pumping out this next-gen update now. I think it's probably because of they might have, the success of the show really made a statement, and they were like, well, let's capitalize on this. Unfortunately, that leaves this mod team kind of out in the cold, but as far as I know, there was no formal collaboration between Bethesda and this Fall-On team. So Bethesda really had no obligation to let them know, technically, right? I mean, that's like the devil's advocate argument, which I hate doing, but when you're Bethesda, right? Bethesda and fan-made mods go hand in hand. I mean, there was a story a while ago where they talked about how they kind of count on the modding community to fix their games once they come out. So you can't be Fallout, or you can't be Bethesda and love your modding community and advocate for that, and then completely blindside one of your biggest modders with an update that derails a project they've been working on for years. So it's a bad look, I think, for Bethesda. Do they care? Probably not. They're probably raking in the cash now with the success of the Fallout show. I'm sure sales have spiked for Fallout significantly, all of them. And you can get all those games for cheap, too. So even still, I mean, especially on PC where you can mod them, I'm sure Bethesda's raking in the cash from the success of the show. But, it's a bad look for Bethesda, really. And hopefully, this team over at the Fallout London team can sort of pick up the pieces, and hopefully it's not that much of a hampering on what they were doing. I don't really know. I'm not a game developer. I say that all the time. I don't know if it's equivalent to switching engines or what, but hopefully they can sort of get back on track and maybe see something this year or even next year, depending on how long the delay is. But yeah, let me know what you think. Are you part of the Fallout modding community? Do you think this is a overstep from Bethesda? Do you think it's a slight? Or do you think they didn't even really consider it, I don't know. It's tough to say, but either way, shout out to the Fallout London team. Hopefully they can get something released sometime soon. So our second story here is from gamesindustry.biz. Meta's first quarter earnings are in, and the tech company continues to dump money into VR/AR without much of a return. Reports show they have lost around $3.8 billion on the venture. But don't worry, folks. Despite that, Meta's profits are still up across the board. This is from Brendan Sinclair at gamesindustry.biz. Quote, the revenue for Meta, this is just some numbers here that I'm going to try to interpret. I'm not an economist, but the revenue, $36.5 billion. That's up 27% year on year. The net income is $12.4 billion. That's up 117% year on year. Sounds good for revenue. I don't know. Again, I don't know how budgets work, but and then this is Reality Labs. This is the VR branch of Meta. Their revenue was up $440 million, which is up 30%. But the operating loss is $3.85 billion, which is compared to a loss of $3.99 billion last year. So the amount they're losing on this tech has gone down. Their profits are still up. But this is a quote from Brendan Sinclair as well. He says, despite losing money at a rate of more than $1 billion per month since June of 2022, Meta affirmed its commitment to Reality Labs, saying, quote, we continue to expect operating losses to increase meaningfully year over year due to our ongoing product development efforts and our investments to further scale our ecosystem. So that's our weekly dose of corporate gibberish for you here on No Credits Rolled. But essentially, they don't care that they're losing money because their profits are still up, and it looks like they're committing to this, right? They're committing to the bit of VR and AR. I don't know why. I can't really figure it out. The scale at which these big tech companies operate astounds me. They can just burn money, $1 billion per month on this. But when you compare it to their profits, it's not that much, right? If you're up, what was the net revenue here? Net income was $12.4 billion. So if you're losing $1 billion a month, I mean, at that point, it's just, is money even real? And if you're committed to this, if you think that this is the future, if you're trying to set the trends, yeah, they're going to keep dumping money into it until everybody accepts it, right? I mean, remember when the iPhone first came out, everybody was like, oh, an iPod and a phone together, how's that going to work? Nobody really bought it. You see this a lot of, time and time again with new tech. and, maybe I'm just a naysayer, but I really don't see VR going that way. If anything, AR is going to be the way it goes, right? Where you have the Tony Stark glasses that look like sunglasses and you put them on and, you get your tech information that way on your screens right there in your eyes, kind of like an Apple Watch, but for your head. Speaking of that, this goes in tandem with this other story. Apple just scaled back their production of the Vision Pros due to a lack of demand. Now, I know we're a video game podcast here, and this is kind of going into tech news, but you can play video games on VR and AR, so it counts. This is from Umar Shakir at The Verge. Quote, Apple analyst Ming-Chi Kuo writes that Apple cut orders for the Vision Pro even before it launched outside of the U.S. His sources claim that Apple now expects to sell only around 400,000 to 450,000 units in 2024. This is compared to what Kuo says was a, quote, market consensus of around 700,000 to 800,000 units. So they cut it in half, essentially, by what people are going to be buying. Just a reminder, the Vision Pros cost $3,500, and turns out the demand was a lot lower than Apple was expecting. Probably because it's $3,500. You can buy a used car for less than that, probably. So I'm not a tech reporter, right? I'm not a reporter at all. I don't know how these companies typically operate, but as an outsider looking in, it really seems like they're trying to make something that just isn't a thing yet, right? They're trying to push into this VR and AR. But I don't see how this becomes the norm, especially at price points like this. And especially for how it's so alien, I think, to wear these headsets on a daily basis. Like, there are videos you can look on YouTube of people wearing their Vision Pros for a full day. And it just doesn't seem, it doesn't seem natural. It doesn't seem like something that, we're going to be in the future in 30 years and everybody's going to be walking around with one of these things on their face. I just don't buy it. But again, I'm not a tech entrepreneur or a tech reporter, so maybe I'm wrong. I'm trying to think of a example where people were naysayers against this technology, a certain technology, and then now it is the norm. I guess you could say kind of like the Apple Watch is like well, who needs that? Now everybody's got one. Or I mentioned the iPhone, combining the iPod and the phone together. I guess that kind of counts. I really think it's just the fact that you're putting something on your face. I really think that is the weirdest part of it for me. The other weird part for me about all these ventures is what it would do to humanity socially, right? How it would impact social interaction. I mentioned those YouTube videos of people wearing them all day, and it isolates them from the people around them because they're constantly wearing these things and they always have screens. They've always got some kind of stimulation, whether it be a video or some kind of data up on the Vision Pros. And people are already isolated having their headphones in and their phones out during the day. And I sound like I'm, 90, but it's true. And in terms of the need of people needing constant stimulation, things like TikTok, where you're watching a video, but then under the video, there's a Subway Surfer or some other kind of stimulation for you to look at. Our brains are just being filled with this useless data and these useless screens that I think the AR and the VR tech is really only going to make that worse and really only isolate us from each other more. And I don't even like people, right? I don't even like talking to strangers that much, but I still think it's a net negative for the species. And you can quote me on that. That being said, if I had one, I would totally use it. But I'm not paying $3,500 for it, that's for sure. So I don't know. It seems like Meta and Apple and all these big tech companies, they really want to commit to this VR, AR future. And I understand they have to set the trend, right? They have to be the ones to do it. And it's weird at first, and then everybody will eventually adopt it. I think the only way you're going to get away with this is if you do the Tony Stark glasses or the Google, what are they called? Google goggles, right? Something like that. Google Glass, maybe. Where they have to look like sunglasses, right? Or like prescription glasses. They have to look normal because the Vision Pros look ridiculous on people's faces. You can't tell me otherwise. You can't tell me when you put that thing on your head and it simulates your eyes coming out. It looks ridiculous. I cannot believe that they released it like that. It's got to be something that already looks like something we know, right? But the tech is not really streamlined enough for that. And if it is, it's ridiculously expensive and nobody can afford it anyway. So you're waiting for that bridge point of accessibility and price point, which I talk about a lot when it comes to video games, actually. So, hey, back on the topic of the show. But I think until you bridge those two things where the average consumer can get it and benefit from it and figure out how to use it, because not everybody is as technically savvy, as they could be or should be, I don't understand how this is going to be profitable. I don't understand what the point of all this is. I don't know. It boggles my mind. I saw the $3.8 billion lost on this, and I just had to talk about it because that is so much money, right? Like, not if you're talking about like the national debt, but $3.8 billion. I don't even know. Like, it's a number that you can't even wrap your head around, and they just burned it. So I don't know. If you've got a Apple Vision Pro, let me know. And if you can afford an Apple Vision Pro, you should subscribe to my Patreon because it's only $5. And if you can afford that, you can definitely afford the Patreon. Anyway, that's enough about me. Old man yells at cloud while he looks through his VR glasses. But yeah, that's the news for today. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. You're listening to No Credits Rolled.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
All right, and we're back on No Credits Rolled. I just got done covering some news stories for this week, and now we are on to the review portion of the show. First game I want to cover today is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This is developed and published by Ubisoft, specifically Ubisoft Montpellier. It's a Metroidvania-style action platformer. Everybody take a drink every time I say the phrase Metroidvania during this review, because boy, did I write it down a lot. Anyway, Ubisoft Montpellier is also known for developing the Rayman games and the Beyond Good and Evil games. The only Rayman game I played was one of the more recent ones, the 2D platformer ones, and that game was pretty good. And you can definitely see that 2D platformer DNA here in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Now, there was a demo for this game a little while back before I fully had the whole thing in my hands. At the time, I didn't really like that demo. I thought it felt pretty double A, and I really didn't vibe with the mechanics or the feel of the game. But now having the full game, I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed this. It's definitely one of the best Metroidvania style games that I've played. It's got so much heart and style to it. Although if you're new to these kind of games, it might be kind of a tough first entry. There's a lot of aspects to it that might not be for everybody, right? There's some difficulty aspects to it with the platforming that might be tough for some folks. I struggled significantly in certain parts of this game. So you might too, I don't know. My touchstones for Metroidvanias are not Metroid or Castlevania. I've never finished either any games in those franchises. I've played a handful. I started the Metroid Prime remaster, but I didn't finish that. So I'll probably talk about that on this show one day whenever I go back to it. And I played those God of War ripoff Castlevania games, and I'm pretty sure those don't count in terms of being a Metroidvania. So my main touchstone for those types of games are the Ori games, Ori and the Blind Forest, and the other one. Those games are fantastic. Highly recommend them. They're on Xbox and PC. They're some of the most beautiful games I've ever played. Fantastic music, Beautiful gameplay, just a really unique and magical experience. But that being said, so take my opinion on this genre with a grain of salt, right? I'm not an expert. I haven't been in the trenches, jumping and platforming for 20 years. I've only played a handful of these kind of games. For me, one of the things Prince of Persia nails is the movement and the platforming. There are sections in this game where I completed a platforming section, and it felt like a boss fight. Like I had just beaten a boss because of the level of precision and timing that's required. Just like Ori and the other games in the genre, you unlock more abilities for traversal and navigation as you go. And just like in a lot of those other games, as you unlock each one, it feels incredible. And it really feels like you're getting this monumental shift in gameplay, whether that be a double jump or a dash or I don't want to spoil the other powers, but in all these games, you always get a double jump, you always get a dash. And it feels great, right? And when it unlocks those new areas of the map for you, or you know that you can go back and now access these areas you previously couldn't, it's a wonderful feeling, and it's why people enjoy these games, and it's why I enjoy these games. One of the things this game does that is a little bit unique from a game like Ori is that when you come across an area that you might not be able to access yet because you lack the ability, you can hold down on the D-pad and you'll create a little memory, which is essentially a screenshot that then saves on the map. And then when you look at the big map, you can hover over wherever you saved it, click on it, and it'll show you exactly what you screenshotted. So you can remind yourself of what you were doing. And it ties into the story of the game, too, because the game's all about the plot is dealing a lot with time, timey-wimey stuff, time travel, time displacement, kind of. So being able to save these memories all around the map is very, very cool, and it feels really good to go around and check them off once you know, hey, I've got double jump now. I can go back to this area, jump up here, go and delete the memory, and now I've opened up this whole new pathway for myself. It's a really satisfying game loop. The combat is another highlight of this game. It's really fast-paced and involves dodging, jumping, and parrying, and the parrying is a particular standout. It captures the frenetic energy of a sword fight because a lot of the enemies you're fighting are blade-based enemies, but there are certain times where there is a yellow flash of a parry, and if you time that one properly and get the parry, you get these really unique animations, these really cool, unique animations for every enemy. And it's cool every single time, right? Like you could see the same one 10 times, and it's the combination of the feeling of nailing the parry, but then also getting the reward of sometimes it's an instant kill. Yeah, you can even do them during boss fights, and it takes a chunk of their health away. Particularly in the boss fights, which I'll cover in a second. The parry mechanic in the boss fights, when you do that, it's like this super cool, like anime cutscene almost, right? You parry and you get this cool attack, and it never gets old. It's one of those things that just never gets old. But it's also a fundamental of the combat. So for those of you that enjoy parrying and dodging and things like that, kind of like in a Souls game, and getting that timing window down, you're going to enjoy this as well. The boss fights, like I said, the boss fights are very, very cool. I've done a bunch of them so far. There's multiple phases to each one. Some of them are a little bit more unique than others, or not unique, more distinct than others. You can really tell the difference in the phases. They're awesome, right? Like the boss designs are all very cool. Some of the mechanics for some of the fights are a little bit cheesy, but take some getting used to. Again, it reminds me a little bit of Dark Souls, where I haven't played Dark Souls. I want to say that. I've played Elden Ring, Bloodborne, a little bit of Sekiro, Dark Souls 3. So like I'm familiar with the genre is what I'm trying to get at. But it reminds me a lot of those games because the boss designs are unique, the boss mechanics are all for the most part unique, and they've all got phases, and there's a real sense of accomplishment when you beat the bosses. Now that being said, the difficulty of these bosses so far has not been that tough, right? It's taken me a couple tries on some of them, but it's not like an Elden Ring where I'm doing like 25 attempts to beat, what was that guy's name? Godric? One of the first bosses in Elden Ring was like notoriously tough when that game first came out, but the boss fights are a particular standout. And the enemy variety, there's a ton of enemy variety in the game, all different kinds, flying, running, jumping, shooting. Each area kind of has their own enemies. And the more enemy variety, the better, because it forces you to change up how you play. The music and the sound design are also a huge highlight. I think each section of the map gets its own kind of music to it. just the sound design alone of you platforming, of you running and double jumping, sliding on a wall, jumping off that, dashing through traps. It sounds great, especially turned all the way up or with headphones on. It manages to capture that feel of I played Prince of Persia: Sands of Time when I was younger, and I think I played that other one that came out. I don't remember what it was called, but when the movie came out, that game wasn't very good, but it captured that 3D feeling of those games of platforming, running, parkour, the stuff that they turn into Assassin's Creed. But it manages to capture that feeling of inertia and movement in a 2D platformer, and it's really, really neat. It's really cool, and it's something that I'm surprised they were able to pull off as effectively as they did. And that ties in with the sound design. Everything sounds great. The score, I guess you could call it, or the soundtrack, a lot of unique songs. All the boss themes are very cool. Like I've said before, I'm not a big story guy when it comes to a lot of these games, but the characters in this game are kind of what draw me in. You start off as a member of the Immortals, which are like a Persian ancient history Justice League kind of. Right off the bat, you're introduced to all your different warrior buddies, and they all look cool, and they all have unique designs as well, just like everything else in the game. And then it's not really a spoiler because it's like the beginning of the game. You end up getting betrayed, and then you end up having to fight each of these people as you go through the game. So it sets it up really well because you're like, oh, you start at the top, right? You start on the Avengers or whatever, and then you end up having to go and fight each member of these teams, which is why they all have a unique weapon or a gimmick to them when they're initially shown off. It's a great way to set up how the game's going to go, and it's really satisfying to develop that relation. They give you a little bit in the beginning of your relationship relative to all these other characters, and it's like just enough to have you buy in when you meet them later on down the road, and once everything has kind of hit the fan, it makes it so that you care. You care enough to be invested in the fight other than just wanting to defeat a boss. Now, there's also a lot of really cool time mechanics. I mean, it wouldn't be Prince of Persia without some kind of time mechanic. Like I said, I played Sands of Time. There are a lot of things very similar to that. And in terms of the story, there are a lot of really cool things they do with time disruption. It almost reminded me of like an episode of Star Trek, where people are displaced out of time or living in multiple timelines, or time is accelerated in one area. Really cool stuff. And if you enjoyed the time stuff in Sands of Time, or if you like those kind of stories in general, I would recommend playing this as well because it does play a key role in the story. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Let me know what you think of it if you have played it. I know it kind of flew under the radar at the beginning of the year, but I would recommend checking it out. Definitely a fantastic 3D platformer, or 2D platformer, excuse me, and definitely worth the time. All right, now we're going to try something a little different. I know we're a video game podcast, like I said, but it's kind of tough to talk about this next game without talking about a TV show as well. So I want to talk about the Fallout TV show on Amazon Prime. It was so good, guys. Like, I was so shocked by how good it was. Kind of like Prince of Persia, I went in with pretty low expectations, and I was completely blown away by the Fallout show. I'm so glad we're in a world where video game adaptations don't suck anymore, and they aren't looked at immediately with a sort of side eye of, oh, it's a video game adaptation, so it's not going to be good. This is another fantastic example of an adaptation that is done right, that is done well, that is done exactly how, if you're a fan of the games, or if you're a newcomer, you can enjoy this show. And I cannot believe they pulled it off. I have some notes I wrote here. Fallout on Amazon Prime captures the spirit of the games in so many different ways. It may be the ultimate adaptation. From the characters, to the music, to the world design, to the humor, everything hit the nail on the head. Whether you have played a Fallout game before, or you just want to jump into the wasteland for the first time, Amazon's Fallout is a fantastic experience through and through. And, that's true. I really don't have a whole lot of negatives about the show. I've only watched through it once, and I binged the back half of it because I was enjoying it so much that I wanted to just finish it. And I really don't ever do that with television. If something comes out, I prefer when things come out weekly because I like watching week to week. Especially if it's something I'm enjoying. I typically don't like to just binge it because then there's no more left and you really can't savor it. But that wasn't the case with this show. I was so interested in where the story was going to go and what was going to happen next that there was one day that I I had a Lego set I had to build, and I just watched like 4 episodes in a row just to finish it. For those of you that are wondering what Lego set I was building, it was the Wolverine X-Men 97 Claw, and it was pretty cool when I built it. Anyway, but yeah, this Amazon Fallout show is incredible. So after I enjoyed the show, and I don't want to spend too much time reviewing the show because I don't review TV shows on this program. Bottom line, go watch it, right? Even if you've never played Fallout, go watch it. It's a great show. But after I really enjoyed the show, I had the hankering, like I'm sure a ton of other people are having now, to get back into one of the games. So I decided to load up my New Vegas save, my Fallout New Vegas save. And since most people really kind of regard that as the best of the genre, so this is what we're reviewing today. Developed by Obsidian Entertainment and released in 2010. That's right, folks. We're reviewing a 14-year-old game on this show. I'm sure there are 14 years. That is a very long time, and I feel old. However, despite the age, Fallout New Vegas still rocks, folks. It still rocks. No spoilers for the show, but I'll just say if you watch the show and you want to pick up a Fallout, this is probably the one that's most similar in terms of themes, environment, kind of characters. It kind of does the Western thing a little bit, like Fallout New Vegas and the show. It still holds up, right? I mean, there are some things about it that are dated. I don't have access to mods, so I'm playing on console, so the game does feel dated at times. I'm sure with mods on PC, because like I said, you can probably get this game for like $5 on PC. You could probably modernize it more because there's a ton of mods on there. The thing that holds up the most about Fallout New Vegas is the writing. There are so many quests in this game that you will stumble upon that will take 30 minutes of your time. It's that classic Bethesda game design that I think a lot of their games nowadays are lacking, right? It's that feeling of Skyrim where you have an objective across the map and you walk and you find 15 different quests along the way that take up, 3 hours of your time. It's the same stuff that happens in this game, and it's great. I've described this as a vibes game, and I think people use the term vibes way too much now, but it really is. I mean, there's in-game radios that you can listen to, which, as someone that loves radio, you're already hitting a sweet spot for me. But you can have your radio on the whole time as you're walking around the game, which also plays into gameplay because depending on where you are, you can get certain signals versus other areas. But yeah, turning on the radio in the game and just walking across the wasteland, and you just wait to see what you encounter. It's a feeling of adventure and exploration that the fact that they were able to pull this off in 2010 is crazy. Now, I never really liked the Fallout games when I was a kid because I thought they were boring. I'll be honest, I thought they were very boring. But that's because I was very into Call of Duty at the time, and I wanted that faster paced shooter. I didn't really understand, how to play an RPG or the nuances of playing RPGs. But now going back, man, I wish I would have told my 10-year-old self to just keep playing this game because I would have spent a whole summer just lost in the Mojave Wasteland here. It's incredible, and it's one of those things where I've been going back and forth between Prince of Persia and New Vegas for this show, and when I want to just kind of not turn my brain off because the writing and stuff is the best part, so you do need to focus on that. But when you kind of just want to immerse yourself in this world and pop on and kind of just wander around, you can. And there was another game I talked about recently where I made a similar comparison where you kind of just want to exist in this world, which is ironic considering it's like a nuclear wasteland, but it's got so much character to it, and it's got so many things to find and explore, and you just feel like a wanderer, or you in the game you're a courier, so you're walking around. It's just got such a unique feel to it that I really think is what makes it special and why it still stands up today. And also the writing, again, which I've already said. Really cool, multiple... I'll give you an example. There was a quest where I needed to go and I had to find this one vault, and I had to figure out how they were growing these plants. It's like one of the most iconic quests in the game, so you might have already heard of it. But the way that I found that quest is one of like 4 different ways that you are given the quest to go to this vault. And then as I'm leaving the person that gave me the quest, another person comes up to me and says, hey, people have been sent to this vault before. You should be careful. Like that guy that just gave you the quest doesn't really care what happens to you. So then you can change what you do. You can work for the lady that warned you, or you can work for the guy that gave you the quest initially. And then, like I said, there are like 4 different ways to get to that vault through other quests that the game kind of just evolves from there. It almost like, it reminds me a little bit of Baldur's Gate, because you can also, which is a thing that you can't do in games like Skyrim, you can kill anyone. Like anybody can die in this game, and then you just can't do their quest for them anymore. Like that's just it. Whereas in Skyrim, they'll take a knee, charge up and come back if they're an essential NPC. Not in this game. You can just blow anybody away that you want. Which, if you're not really big on sneaking or talking, you just want to kill everyone. I mean, assuming you have like the health and the ammo to back it up, you can. I actually just recently unlocked a perk where you just do more damage of all types and it's like the perk description is like, you are better at killing because you love it so much. So I was like, I don't know if I want to take that as a compliment, but hey, I'll take the buff. But yeah, like I say, there are a little, some negatives in 2024 that you just are not going to be able to avoid. The game looks rough. Graphically, it looks rough. And I want to make that distinction. Graphically, it looks rough, but there is an art direction there that is very deliberate. In terms of the desert versus the Las Vegas Strip, when you eventually get to that, there is art direction there, not to mention the art direction of Fallout in general, that 1950s post-war, Cold War kind of art style. I'm sure someone that knows art can tell me what that's supposed to be called, but it still feels very distinct. It just looks rough because it's a 14-year-old game and there's really no getting around that. And, Bethesda has never really been known for their graphical prowess. But I think that's probably the 2 biggest things are probably the graphics and the gunplay. Those have never really been Fallout strong suits. But people, I think if you're going to go into a Fallout game, you got to know that you're not playing a Call of Duty. You're playing something more akin to a Baldur's Gate or an RPG, where the main drive here is supposed to be doing these quests and your skill checks and making relationships with your companions and the different ways that quests intertwine and the moral decisions you can make. And then, the gunplay is kind of separate from that, which is why they've got the VAT system where time stops and you can target different enemy body parts. Right, like that was put into the game because the aiming was so tough. So it's not supposed to be this like AAA first-person shooter. It's a AAA RPG, and I think as an RPG, it's one of the best there ever is. As an RPG, it's one of the best there's ever been. And I just have one last note here before we wrap up our discussion today. What I would give for a New Vegas remastered, right? Like, they don't really do that. They haven't really remastered any of their other games, to my knowledge. I'm probably forgetting a really obvious one. But what I would give, you don't even have to change. Like, just update the graphics. Or, like, if you could put it in Fallout 4's engine, because that game obviously looks a little bit more modern. I don't know. What I would give is all I'm saying. Just to polish it up a little bit. I mean, just think if they did that with Skyrim too, or like with Fallout 3. I don't know. I just think it would be a license to print money. But I want to know, have you watched the Fallout show? Have you played a Fallout? Are you going to get into a Fallout because of the show? I think it's getting a lot of new people on board, and it's getting a lot of people back in the Fallout after the kind of middling success that Fallout 76 had, which I think is great. I think if we get a Fallout 5 now because of this, I think that's going to be a good thing. Hopefully they can bounce back from Starfield, which, that game sucks. So looking forward to a Fallout 5 or whatever comes next in the Fallout universe. But yeah, let me know what you think. It's going to wrap up episode 7 of No Credits Rolled. Thank you so much for listening. I just want to thank Philly Drinkers again for having the affiliation with the show. Don't forget to use the link in the description to get all of your Philly sports merch that you could possibly need from the folks over at Philly Drinkers. A couple other things I want to hit before we wrap up today. You can email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can also call in. That's right, our call-in line has been ice cold since we've made it, so feel free to leave a voicemail. You can call in at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713, and we might just play it on the air. Make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, check out the Patreon. Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps me to buy a cargo ship full of Apple Vision Pros. But yeah, that's all I got for you on today's episode of No Credits Rolled. I'll see you next time.